Hi, and welcome to this episode of the DC Life podcast. Today, we're going to chat with someone about something in the life of our church.
Hello, I'm Greg Gardner. Welcome to another edition of the DC Life podcast. Today we've got another one of our Getting to Know You chats with a member of Disciples Church, and that member is Katie McIntosh. Hey, Katie. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
That's good. You guys are relatively new to Disciples Church. When did you and your hubby first come along to DC?
So we moved to Springfield Lakes in September of 2020.
Yeah, right.
We live not very far from the church, so we started coming shortly after that. So it's a bit over a year, I guess, getting on to 18 months.
Yeah, right. Very cool. Well, look, we'll get to your family in a minute or two, but it might be nice to learn just a little bit about you firstly. So where did you grow up?
Mostly, entirely in the Redlands.
Oh, okay.
So Bayside.
Yep.
Yeah, my family moved to Mount Cotton when I was 8 from Capalaba. So
yeah, right.
Yeah, and I went to high school in Cleveland, so it was all Bayside.
Yeah, okay. So you get the benefit of the cool sea breezes over that side, which we don't really get so much out this side of town. Do you miss that?
I miss the area. Like, it's a lovely place.
Yeah.
I still get out there to see my parents. So
yeah, right. Yeah. It's Fiona and I have lived in the northeast, the northwest, and the southwest part of Brisbane, but we've not lived really in the southeast part of Brisbane over that way, so we don't know that particularly well. But visited a few times, and it always seems cooler. I think that's the first thing that hits me about that. So was going to church part of your experience growing up?
It was, yes.
Yeah, okay.
My dad comes from a Catholic background, so when we were quite small, we were split between Catholic Church and Protestant Church.
Oh, wow.
And eventually we kind of transitioned to more of the Protestant Church. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
But going to church on a Sunday was always a thing.
Yeah.
And then as we got older, I have 3 siblings, and it was up to us if we wanted to keep going.
Right.
So sort of around high school, I chose to stay at church, and my siblings didn't end up staying at church.
Okay.
So I think I started going to youth group, and it became sort of my choice then.
Yeah.
And a bit more, ownership of my own beliefs, I guess.
Yeah, right. Did you notice much of that with that sort of Catholic Protestant dynamic going on as a younger kid? Did some of the differences, were they apparent to you then, or was just church, whichever one you went to, it didn't really matter much? Or
I don't think I was super aware of the differences. We just knew that there was different church.
Yeah.
And that was probably when we were quite young.
Yeah.
But I think looking back, I can see more of the different dynamics, but not so much at the time.
Yeah. So, did you become a Christian in high school? Was that?
I would say, I don't know when I became a Christian.
Yeah.
I think it was more a growing faith with time and a gradual thing. I grew up learning about the Bible and God and Jesus, and I never rejected that, but I don't think it was as real to me until later in life. And just, growing up and...
Clearly, though, you got to a point where you said, your siblings, they all made a decision not to continue with church, whereas you made the decision to continue with church. So was it in that zone, do you think, that you really owned faith for yourself, or did it still take a little while after that to kick in?
I think when I got to high school and started going to youth group, before that, we'd not really done much outside of sort of Sunday church.
Right.
So I think that was interacting with people my own age who believed, and I guess just, taking it more personally and learning more of Scripture. And then there weren't a lot of young people at my church, so I think then when I got to university, there was even more of a strengthening. I started going to QUT Christians, which is Australian Fellowship of Evangelical Students group.
Yeah.
And that's where I made a lot of my Christian friends who are still really good friends with me. And I think the fellowship and just the community at university was a really important factor for me.
Yeah.
I chose kind of a strange double degree, so I was in arts and science. So microbiology and Japanese do not lend themselves to like a strong cohort of students.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much community within my studies, but certainly through QUT Christians, there was a lot of fellowship, and that was where I found community.
That's good.
Yeah.
Tell me about Jesus. Who is Jesus to you?
So I think a big part of my faith is feeling how weak I am and how I don't have to be strong. Through Jesus, I'm made strong.
Yes.
And I can be accepted before God. So I think there's just a huge amount of rest in that.
Yeah.
And I've struggled a lot with anxiety, like through different times in my life, and different health challenges. And I think maybe sort of growing up, going to university, I felt very capable.
Yes.
And then some things happened in my life that just made me feel like I had nothing to give.
Yeah.
And I think that in Jesus, I find that rest and that hope, because I tend to be sort of pessimistic and, I don't always see the hopeful side of things, but in God there's hope and strength.
Yeah. He's got this beautiful knack of just allowing us to find the end of our strength, or the end of our rope, so to speak, to just experience our frailty, experience our the fact that we're not infinite like he is, and he'll use whatever in our lives to sort of get us to that point sometimes, so that we learn to trust in him. I remember when I was wrestling with the whole question of Christianity. I thought I was a Christian because I was, a good Catholic boy. And then I decided, no, I don't think I am a Christian at all, because I'm not believing all of this Jesus stuff. And that was kind of a scary time for me, because I felt like, okay, well, I don't know what I am, and I don't know what I'm believing or trusting in. And so getting to that point where you realise, as you just said, it's about Jesus, it's about what he's done, the strength that he provides, the goodness he provides, the forgiveness that he provides, is it's a very beautiful moment when you sort of come to understand that and realise that. Hey, yeah, it's really cool. How does that change your life? Like what and possibly because you don't have a road to Damascus. I once was a drug dealer, then I met Jesus, and now I'm a florist or something. You may not have a big life change thing there, but you've been a Christian for a while now. So what can you notice about your life that you think has changed because of your faith in Jesus?
I think that I'm probably more acutely aware of my own selfishness.
Wow.
As a reflection of Jesus' loving kindness. And I know that I can't make myself right with God.
Yeah.
So I think, just being able to trust that God has everything under control changes a lot. I think there's been situations in my life where I have been so unable to control what's happening that without God as a grounding factor, just don't know where I am. And it's almost just, that's all that's been left. And I think sometimes it's through really difficult times that you realise that you do trust God and that you need God. Because, what else is there?
That's right.
And I think it's just also given me great respect for like the miracle of life and health and just how things in the world work as they should under God. Not always as we expect them to or hope that they will, but we can look back and see God in things when maybe at the time we didn't know what was happening or why.
Well, as well as married, you're also a mum. We'll get to that in just a minute, but let's just go to the workspace thing for a second. What job are you doing at the moment?
Yeah. Since I had our daughter, I work just part-time.
Yep.
So I do admin at a TAFE office.
Yes.
I've never been very career-driven. So
Which is totally fine.
I've had interests, but it's kind of like I have a job.
Yeah.
I go to my job and then that's done.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I look after our daughter Rena.
Yes.
The other days.
Yep.
And that keeps me pretty busy.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So, where did you meet Clay?
We met at a church conference.
Okay.
So at what is now called St. Lucia Bible Church.
Right.
And we already had a lot of mutual friends who'd been working interstate and then came back. And we met and sort of got along well.
Yep.
And then I was moving to Japan for 6 months. So he asked me out for coffee and I said yes. And then I thought about it and I said no. So I kind of backed out of that one. I was like, actually, I'm moving to Japan for 6 months. So, but we kept in touch. And then, when I moved back from Japan, he was living in Tasmania again.
Okay.
So we were very, connected from a distance for a long time. And shortly thereafter, I actually had major surgery, which did not go well. Yeah. And I had been feeling very convicted that God wanted me to move back to Japan, and that's where I should be.
Yes.
And therefore, I shouldn't be committing to a relationship in Australia. And God kind of said, well, now you'll be in hospital for weeks. And I came very close to dying at one point. And Clay kind of was just showing up as a friend. Like he wasn't pushing anything, but he was kind of there to encourage me and support me through a really hard time. And following that, I was quite depressed and not in any shape to do anything.
If he was showing interest in those circumstances, maybe the thought occurred to you he might be a keeper.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's not that I wasn't interested, but I just felt like God had other plans for me.
Okay.
And then it was kind of like, well, that's not working out. So, and then we ended up dating, and 18 months after we got married, we moved to Japan for 5 years.
So God said you could have both.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of
so what was the pull to Japan? Tell us about that.
So I studied Japanese all through high school.
Yeah.
Mainly just because I enjoyed it and I like languages.
Okay.
And then through university, I continued studying and did exchange.
Right.
Worked in a trade office for 6 months after uni. And I just felt like, as a Christian, it was a great place to be. There's not a huge Christian population. I wasn't necessarily thinking that I needed to be a missionary, but just a Christian in Japan. And see what God wanted me to do there. And I was just trying to work that out and what that meant around the time. And Clay was kind of like, well, I like Japan. I could go to Japan.
Wow.
I was like, really?
Are you just saying
but
that?
he was very persistent, and that all worked out.
So what? As you look back on that time, what did you say? 5 years that you
in Japan,
that you had there, yeah. So what did God do in you or through you, in that time? Do you think?
So we both moved over there as assistant language teachers, so helping out with English language education in schools. I only worked full-time for the first year, but Clay did renew his contract for the full 5, which is the maximum you can do on that program. So a lot of the time I was working part-time. We had hoped to start a family, which didn't happen as quickly as we had thought it might. So there was a lot of medical stuff that I was doing sort of, I guess, behind the scenes that not everyone knew about. But it also gave me the opportunity to volunteer at a children's home.
Yeah, right.
So Japan has very institutionalised care of children who can't be with their families, not necessarily orphans, but parents are not required to give up legal control of their kids. So they live in institutions.
Yeah, right.
So it was mostly, it was technically an infant massage program, but mostly just holding babies and playing with really little kids who couldn't live with their parents. So that was some hours each week, and that was really like emotional because it was like I want these kids to feel loved and to know God's love and and being part of a church there as well.
Have you any idea of any of the kids that you were looking at? Like, have you got any ongoing contact, or do you get to hear anything of their lives?
It's very
it might be
sensitive privacy-wise.
Okay.
So I was never allowed to have photos or anything of them.
Yeah.
So it's just memories, and they would all have
It might
grown
be
up
one
now,
of those things
so-
in eternity that
that's
you
right.
you might find something there.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Well, if you have not got to know or connected with Katie and Clay since they've been at DC, you've probably noticed their daughter Rena, who's often here in her little Ferrari wheelchair to match her lovely red hair. Tell us about Rena and her story.
Yeah, so Rena was born in February 2019.
Yep.
And it was after a long period of trying to have a kid.
Yeah.
So it seemed surreal that we had this baby, and she was perfect and beautiful.
Wow.
And new parents, we were learning a lot as we went. But as she got sort of to maybe 3 months, we started to think maybe something wasn't quite right. She wasn't lifting her head on her tummy. She had very little head control. So everyone sort of says, every child is different.
Yeah.
And kids take their time, and she's just laid
Which
back.
probably wasn't the most helpful advice to you at the time.
No.
Looking back now. Anyway.
But she gradually started to move less, and we started to realise that she was actually getting weaker, not stronger.
Yeah, right.
Which is not the way it's supposed to go. So by the time we got her in to see a paediatrician at about 5 months, she just called the hospital straight away, basically.
Wow.
I think she knew what was wrong, but she probably kindly didn't tell us straight away, so we
Okay.
couldn't go home and Google.
Yeah.
But the neuromuscular team, who we saw the very next day, they told us that Rena most likely had spinal muscular atrophy type 1,
Right.
or SMA.
Yep.
And it took a week to confirm that diagnosis with a blood test.
Okay. Yep.
But it's a rare genetic condition that affects about 1 in 10,000 live births.
Wow.
And we didn't know, but Clayton and I are both carriers. About 1 in 35 to 40 people are carriers.
Wow.
So there'll be several people at DC who are SMA carriers.
Yeah. Do you need to have both husband and wife to be a carrier in order to...
Most cases.
Yeah,
so
right.
probably 95 or more cases.
Yeah.
Both parents are carriers.
Yeah, okay.
But we weren't aware of that, as most people are not aware.
And the prognosis for Rena at that point was not good, was it?
No. So without treatment, the life expectancy is less than 2 years.
Yeah.
But treatment has recently become available. So the condition causes progressive muscle wasting.
Right.
And up until the year before Rena was born, there was no treatment on the PBS for SMA. So knowing that we were trying to have kids for 5 or 6 years before that is just a bit chilling, knowing that a child with SMA may not have survived even 5 years earlier.
Yeah.
But she was able to start treatment straight away.
Yep.
And that involved a lumbar puncture to deliver this medicine that kept her nerves from continuing to die. Which is just amazing. But we weren't really promised much.
Right.
We were told that she might be able to hold her head up and maybe sit up in time with the treatment.
Right.
But there was I think all we were promised was likely ICU time when she got sick.
Right.
Which, praise God, hasn't happened. She's actually been surprisingly well.
Yeah.
But she's already surpassed what we were told we might expect.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, even in the time that you've been with us, I mean, just observing her and seeing her growing, not just as a regular kid would grow, but just sort of seeing how, like, even her head, I can remember when you guys first turned up and the head was really floppy, and you look at her now and, like, there's been such great progress, really.
Yeah.
So that's been incredible given the prognosis that you were...
Yeah. But even though we took her to the paediatrician worried, we had no idea of, like, the magnitude of the issue. And it was just terrifying when they told us that. And we weren't sure if she'd ever sit up or, we weren't sure if we'd ever celebrate a birthday with her or if she'd ever be able to turn the pages of a book.
Yeah.
So I think to start with, it was like, will she be able to walk? And then it changed to, will she be able to breathe?
Yeah,
Will she be able to eat? So you go through this progression of, it doesn't matter what she can do if we can save her life. So you really change your perspective about what's important.
Yeah. And how have you and Clay handled that as time's gone on? I mean, you seem quite, resolved in a good way about it, but I'm sure you would have had moments along the way where it was, tough times.
Definitely, and it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's not just a continuous improvement in how we cope with it. I really struggle when people talk about SMA as a terminal condition.
Right.
And we have discussions about this at home. Rena's starting to understand more, so we try not to have them around her.
Yeah.
But I think I've had to accept that everyone is dying.
Yeah,
Some of us are dying quicker than others.
Yeah, that's very, very true.
We don't know. Yeah, like it's a life-threatening condition.
Yeah.
So if she gets the flu, she could end up in ICU. That could be it for Rena, and we don't know. And that is really hard to deal with. But I just, God gave us Rena, and one day he'll take her back.
Yes.
And I think we just have to live with that and know that any person could be taken home to Jesus at any time.
Exactly.
Or it just consumes me.
Yeah.
We just have to trust.
And you've been given the privilege of being her mum, and for all of the uniqueness that her life involves.
Yeah.
That's yours to enjoy. And like any kid, there's upsides and downsides. We've all been, privy to that, or those of us who are parents at least. And so, there's some unique things there, for you guys. But you've become a bit of a campaigner for having those. There's testing that can be done for SMA a lot earlier than where you guys were able to pick it up. So, has that progressed any? Are we doing things better now than we were, or are we still being a bit slow on the uptake of that?
So I advocate for newborn screening of SMA.
Yep.
Most children, just about all have a heel prick test when they're born. So blood is tested for conditions like cystic fibrosis and metabolic conditions.
Yeah.
But at the moment, only ACT and the New South Wales test for SMA.
Right.
So other states' children still aren't being picked up until they're symptomatic. If you catch it before symptoms, children can live very close to a typical life and meet most of their milestones.
Wow.
So it's preventable disability at this point. And I think the US is up to screening about 90% of the population for SMA at birth.
Mm-hmm.
But in Australia, there's been more of a push for carrier testing. So people being encouraged to check if they're carriers before having a baby, either before getting pregnant or during pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then some people choose not to have children that have SMA, or if they already have a child with SMA, they might choose to go through IVF and screen their embryos.
Oh, okay.
And not have the children who have SMA.
Yep. So we're jumping into all sorts of ethical dilemmas in the middle of that.
But we've never been open to discarding embryos.
Yeah, no.
We believe that those are tiny little people.
Yeah.
And we're pregnant with our second baby girl now. So when she's born, we'll screen her, and there's a 25% chance that she'll have SMA.
Okay.
But if she does, we will act very quickly.
You know what to do.
To give her the best opportunity at healthy
absolutely.
Outcomes. And we know what to do. So
Exactly.
I very much feel like there's no reason not to bring these children into the world. We just need to give them better opportunities.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've seen you guys interacting, with Rena at home, and you get the opportunity to, as every parent does, be sharing stories, the Bible, about Jesus, and you still get to do all of that kind of stuff, which is lovely, and she gets to hear the good news of Jesus in the middle of that as well. So it's really about learning to trust God, isn't it? You know, with like a lot of the story that you've shared today has been, you know, well, I kind of thought this, and then God brought this along, and I was going to do this, but then this happened.
Yeah.
And God's really weaving a pattern, you know, out of your life, and it's not always exactly what you wanted or what might have been your choice of what to, you know, how it would go, but His grace is there, and that's important with that as well. Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Okay.
We've loved getting to know you and Clayton, and especially Rena, and we'll be in prayer for your next one, who's due in a little while. So that will be great. Well, I've been speaking with one of the members of Disciples Church, Katie McIntosh. Katie, thanks for popping by for a chat today.
Thank you.
If you'd like more information about what's going on at Disciples Church, check out our website or email us at podcast@disciples.org.au if you have any questions or feedback. Thanks for listening in. We'll catch you next time.